Well, welcome back to Lewd Lycanthrope, you weary night owls who can only let sleep claim you when the darkness has had its say, when something cold and patient whispers long enough to quiet the racing thoughts in your head. These stories aren't meant to jolt you awake or keep you gripping the sheets in terror. They're lullabies carved from the shadows, slow, deliberate, drawn out so the dread settles like a fog, heavy and familiar, until your eyelids grow too heavy to fight. Tonight we give each one the time it deserves. 5 separate nightmares, each one allowed to breathe, to circle, to press closer. Let the words wash over you. Let them pull you under. If your breathing slows and your body grows slack, well, that's the point. Now let's dim the lights, lie back, and let the night do its gentle work, shall we? Our first story tonight is titled The Midnight Visitor. Sarah had lived alone for 7 years. She liked the quiet. She liked the way the apartment felt sealed when she turned the deadbolt at 10 p.m. The knocks, well, they started small. 3 taps at exactly 2:47 a.m. on the dot every night. She ignored them the first month. Then she began timing them. Always 3, always the same minute of the night. One night she decided to speak. "Who is it?" Silence stretched long enough that she thought she'd imagined the voice that finally answered. It was soft, almost thoughtful, from the other side of the door. "You used to ask me that when you were little, Sarah. You'd wake up and whisper it in the dark. I never answered then. I thought you weren't ready." Sarah sat up in the bed. "I don't think I'm ready now." "You are, Sarah. You're older. You've stopped believing in monsters under the bed. That makes it easier for me to stand at the door instead." She walked to the living room, bare feet, silent on the hardwood floor. She pressed her ear to the door. "What is it you want from me?" "To come in, Sarah. To sit in the chair by the window the way I used to when you were asleep. To watch your chest rise and fall. To make sure nothing else gets close to you." "Nothing else?" "Oh, Sarah, there are way worse things than me out there." She laughed once, dry and disbelieving. "You're the worst thing I can imagine right now." "Oh, that's where you're wrong, Sarah. I'm the one that kept the others away. The shapes that used to stand at the foot of your bed when you were 6. The hand that brushed your ankle under the covers when you were 12. I pushed them back. I stayed outside so they couldn't come in." Sarah slid down the door until she sat on the floor. "Why are you doing this now?" "Well, you stopped looking for me, Sarah. You stopped checking under the bed. You stopped leaving the hall light on. You grew up and forgot our bargain." "What bargain are you talking about?" "The one that every child makes without knowing, Sarah. You let the night watch you so the night won't take you." She stayed there until the clock passed 3 a.m. The knocks, well, they didn't return that night. The next night they came from inside the coat closet. 3 taps. She opened the door, but coats, scarves, and no one was there. The night after that, from behind the bathroom mirror while she brushed her teeth. Tap, tap, tap. She opened the cabinet, but it was empty on the inside. The following week, the taps moved to the wall beside her bed, right behind where her head rested. She pressed her palm to the plaster. It was warm. Not room temperature, but more like body temperature. She whispered, "Are you in the wall now?" "I've always been close, Sarah. The wall is just thinner tonight." "Why won't you leave me alone?" "Well, because you're lonely, Sarah. You don't say it, but you don't even think it most days, to be honest. But the apartment is too quiet. You leave the radio on when you cook. You fall asleep with the television murmuring. You're afraid of silence. I fill that silence, Sarah. But I don't want you to fill it. Yes, you do. That's why you haven't moved. It's why you haven't told anyone about this. You're curious what happens if you let me in. She pulled the mattress to the living room floor, slept there for 3 nights. The taps, well, they of course followed. On the coffee table, the arm of the couch, the remote she clutched like a weapon. One morning she woke to 3 small fingerprints on her forearm. Faint, bluish, and they were all gone by noon. She moved the furniture, she changed the locks, she stayed at a friend's house for a week. The taps, well, they found her there too, on the guest room nightstand at 2:47 a.m. on the dot. She came home, the front door was unlocked. She swears that she locked it when she left. On the kitchen counter lay a single piece of paper. 3 words in her own handwriting were written on it. Let me stay. She tore it up. The pieces smelled faintly of rain and old books. Now she no longer asks questions. She waits for the 3 taps, wherever they come from. Sometimes she answers. Sometimes she just listens. Because the visitor, well, he's very patient. And the apartment is still too quiet without him. Make sure you always listen to the night. Well, if I didn't put you to sleep with the last story, maybe this one will. Our story number 2 is titled The Last Passenger. James took the late night subway because his job at the data center ended at 2 a.m., and the buses had long stopped running by then. The train was always nearly empty. 3 or 4 people scattered through the cars, heads down, eyes closed or staring at their phones. He preferred the quiet. It was calming to him. One night, around 2:20, he boarded the last train north. The car was empty except for an older man in a gray coat sitting near the back, facing forward. James sat midway, put his earbuds in, and let the rhythm of the tracks lull him into a sense of security. At the next stop, no one got on. The doors closed. The train started moving. He noticed the man in the gray coat was still staring forward, perfectly still. No phone, no book, just staring. At the following stop, again nothing. The train began to rattle on like it always does, and James glanced back. The man, well, he hadn't moved, hadn't blinked, well, as far as he could tell anyway. By the 3rd stop, James pulled out one earbud and said, "Hey, mister, are you okay?" No answer. The man remained fixed. James shrugged, put the earbud back in, and the train began to sway on. At the 4th stop, the lights flickered once. When they steadied, the man in the gray coat was sitting 1 row closer to James, still facing forward, still motionless. James' stomach tightened. He looked around. The car was still empty except for them. He stood, walked to the door between the cars, tried to open it, but it was locked. The train was moving too fast to jump anyway, he thought. He returned to his seat. The man was now 2 rows closer, still staring directly ahead. James spoke up louder. "Hey, look, man, this isn't funny." But no response. The next stop, lights dimmed longer this time. When they came back up, the gray coat was sitting directly across the aisle from James. Close enough that James could smell old wool and something metallic underneath. James stood again, back toward the far end of the car. "Look, man, stay where you are." The man turned his head, slowly, mechanically, until he was looking straight at James. His eyes were pale, almost colorless. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The train lurched. The lights flickered again. When they stabilized, the man was gone. Nothing there. James spun around, but nothing. Just then he heard breathing, close, behind him. He spun around again, the man in the gray coat stood at the very end of the car, where James had just been standing, facing him now, not moving, just watching. James backed up until his shoulders hit the door. "Look, you freak, what do you want from me?" The man took one step forward, then another, slow, deliberate. James banged on the door. "For the love of God, someone stop this train, please." But the train, it didn't stop. At the next station, the doors opened. James bolted out, ran up the stairs, into the street, didn't bother looking back. He took cabs after that, avoided subways entirely. Months later, he had to take the train again. Emergency at work, no other way. He boarded the same line, the same time, and the car was empty. He sat near the front, watched every stop. At the third stop, the doors opened, but no one entered. The train began moving again. He heard the breathing again, soft, steady, from the back of the car. He didn't bother turning around. When the train reached his stop, the doors opened, he stepped out. The platform was deserted. Behind him, the doors closed, and the train pulled away. He walked home fast, didn't look over his shoulder once. But every night since, when he closes his eyes, he feels the gentle rock of the train, hears the breathing, knows that somewhere, in some car on some line, the man in the gray coat is still riding, waiting for the next empty seat. Well, if your eyes aren't heavy by now, I sure hope the next story helps with that. Our next story is titled The Shadow in the Mirror. James was 9 when his grandmother died. The funeral home had a tall mirror in the hallway. When he walked past, his reflection hesitated for about a half a second. He raised his hand to wave goodbye to an uncle, and the glass hand rose after. He blinked, the reflection blinked, just slightly later. He never told his parents about this. Grief plays tricks, he told himself. 10 years later, he rented a loft, a floor-to-ceiling mirrored wardrobe opposite the bed. He draped a quilt over it the first afternoon, and the quilt stayed for some time. One night, it fell while he slept. He woke up at 3:22 a.m., moonlight silvering the glass. His reflection sat upright in the bed, eyes open, while his real body still lay somewhat flat. He sat up slowly. The reflection mirrored his motion, about a half a beat behind, though. He raised his right hand. The reflection raised its left. He whispered, "What are you?" The reflection mouthed the words, but no sound came out. Then it smiled. His private smile, the one he used when he was alone. He stood, and it stood. He walked forward. It backed away until its shoulders touched the far side of the glass. He pressed his palm flat. The glass was cold, ordinary. The reflection pressed back, but deeper, as though reaching through thick water. He pulled away. His handprint fogged the surface. A matching print appeared on the inside, backwards of course, with fingers spread wider. He rehung the quilt and taped the edges down. 2 nights later, tapping woke him from inside the wardrobe. Steady, unhurried knocks. He ripped the quilt down. The reflection stood closer, nose almost against the glass. It raised one hand very slowly, pointed at his chest, then at its own chest. James backed up. "Why are you doing this?" The reflection opened its mouth wide, but again, no sound came out. The wardrobe door creaked open an inch by itself. He slammed it shut, locked it. The tapping continued, though, methodical, never frantic. He called a contractor. He removed the doors and installed plain wood panels. That night, the tapping came from the bathroom mirror, so he covered it with a towel. The next night, from the toaster's chrome front. He unplugged it, stored it in a closet. The following night, from dark windows when he passed to get water. He taped newspaper over every pane. He shattered the bathroom mirror with a hammer, swept up every shard, drove 3 blocks to throw the dustpan into a public dumpster. The next morning, a single shard lay on his pillow, edge up, reflecting his left eye when he leaned close. He no longer uses mirrors. He brushes his teeth by feel, dresses in the dark, showers with his eyes closed. But in shop windows and car side mirrors, puddles after the rain, he always manages to catch a glimpse. A turn of the head he didn't want. A blink out of sync. That small, private smile. He never looks directly, because if he does, the reflection will no longer stay behind the glass. It will step forward, 1/2 second late, and stand exactly where he is standing. Well, if our verbal Ambien trip hasn't put you down yet, I'm sure story number 4 might help with that. The title of this story is The Forgotten Doll. Scarlett's mother kept the doll on the top shelf of her sewing room. Porcelain face, fixed half smile, blue glass eyes that seemed to follow movement even when no one was looking. Scarlett never went near it as a child. She told herself it was just a toy, but every time she passed the open door, she felt those eyes settle on the back of her neck like cold fingers. After the funeral, Scarlett packed the sewing room herself. The house was quiet except for the rustle of tissue paper and the occasional creaking floorboard. She found the doll exactly where it had always been, dusty, unmoved, staring straight ahead as though it had been waiting for her. She wrapped it in an old towel and placed it in a clear box, taped the lid shut, and drove it home to her small apartment downtown. She placed the box on a hallway shelf, facing the wall so the eyes couldn't see into the living room. She told herself it was sentimental, nothing more. On the first night, a soft thud came from the hallway. She found the box on the floor, lid still taped, but the doll had shifted inside. It was now laying face up, arms straight at its sides, eyes fixed on the ceiling light. Scarlett set it back on the shelf, facing away again. She double-checked the tape and went back to bed. On the second night, small footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling her bed in the dark. Pat, 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 like little leather shoes on hard wood. She turned on the lamp, but the floor was empty. The doll was still on the shelf. On the third night, the footsteps stopped beside her pillow. The mattress dipped, barely, the weight of a small palm pressing down on it. She kept her eyes shut. Her breathing was shallow, and she stayed that way until the pressure lifted at dawn. On the fourth night, she woke to find the doll sitting on the foot of her bed, back turned to her, facing the bedroom door like a sentry. Its head was tilted slightly, as though listening for something outside. Scarlett carried it into the linen closet, locked the door. All night the knob turned, though, slowly, persistently. Never frantic, just patiently turning. On the fifth morning, she drove to the county landfill on the edge of town, watched the box disappear under a bulldozer blade, gravel and dirt swallowing it whole. She stood there until the machine had moved on. 2 weeks later, the doll sat on her welcome mat, dress muddied and torn at the hem, one eye clouded black as though scorched, and the other still bright blue and unblinking. No delivery label, no footprints in the hallway carpet. She built a fire in the small backyard pit behind her building, placed the doll in the flames, and watched the porcelain gray and then blacken. She heard the faint pop of glass eyes bursting from the heat. The synthetic hair curled and smoked, and The ashes blew east on the wind. 3 days later, a single porcelain finger, perfectly clean, nail-painted faded pink, rested on her nightstand beside her alarm clock. 1 week later, a curl of yellow synthetic hair lay coiled inside her left shoe, as though someone had placed it there while she slept. A month goes by, a fragment of blue iris floated at the bottom of her coffee cup, staring up when she lifted it to drink, unblinking even as the liquid swirled. Scarlett stopped drinking from cups, stopped wearing shoes inside the house, stopped turning the lights off completely. Fragments kept appearing, methodical, accumulating. A tiny porcelain hand curled under her pillow like it had been waiting for her to sleep on it. A lock of hair taped inside her medicine cabinet with clear tape. A cracked porcelain cheek pressed flat against the bathroom mirror so it stared back when she opened the door. A shard of blue dress fabric folded neatly and placed on her keyboard. Eventually she bought a clear plastic display case, small, rectangular, the kind that are used for collectible figurines. Clear sides, hinged lid, small latch, no lock. She told herself it would be easier to see if anything moved inside. She placed it on the dresser where she could watch it from bed. Every new piece went into that case. She opened the lid, set the fragment down carefully among the others, and closed it again. The case grew heavier week by week. Through the transparent plastic, she could see the collection building. Fingers, hair locks, eye shards, cheek fragments, dress scraps, all arranged in loose piles at first. She began leaving the bedroom light on low at night so she could glance over and check. The case sat silent under the dim glow. One morning she woke to find the latch open, the lid slightly raised, and inside, the pieces had shifted overnight, arranged into a rough shape of a hand. Fingers spread, reaching upward toward the lid, though trying to push it open the rest of the way. She closed the lid, latched it firmly, and the footsteps returned that night, small, circling, but slower now, more deliberate, as though whatever walked them had grown heavier. She no longer sleeps deeply. She lies awake listening for the faint click of porcelain settling against plastic, for the soft pad of tiny shoes drawing closer each night. She still opens the case every time a new fragment appears. She can't help it. She has to see where it fits, has to place it herself. The clear plastic lets her watch the collection grow without ever touching the pieces directly. But lately, the pieces move even when the lid is latched. She sees them shift through the sides, slowly, deliberately, forming shapes that weren't there when she went to bed. A tiny arm, a partial torso, the curve of a shoulder. She no longer sleeps facing away from the dresser. When the last fragment arrives, when the case can hold no more, the doll will not need to knock on the door. It will simply be standing at the foot of her bed again, whole, quiet, home. Its remaining eye fixed on her, sleeping through the clear plastic that once tried to contain it. Well, if your eyes aren't staring at the back of your eyelids by now, I do apologize and know that I am trying, but story number 5 might be the one to seal the deal, if you will. And this one is definitely a personal favorite of mine, and you'll see why in a second. The title of this story is The Howling Hunger. Danny's grandfather spoke of the woods once, voice low over the kitchen table. "Don't stay after moonrise," he said. "It doesn't ask, it takes." Danny was 12 at the time, so he laughed, thought it was just another old man's story meant to keep kids inside after dark. 20 years later, he bought the cabin on the edge of the national forest. He needed distance from the city noise, from the fluorescent hum of his old job. Basically, he needed trees instead of concrete. The place was cheap, isolated, no neighbors for miles. Absolutely perfect in Danny's eyes. The first full moon after moving in, a fever rolled through him like a bad flu. His jaw ached, his skin felt tight. He blamed cheap takeout from the gas station on the highway. Slept through the worst of it, waking soaked in sweat, sheets twisted around his legs. On the second full moon, fingernails split lengthwise while he was chopping wood for the stove. Blood welled up fast, bright against the pine logs. He wrapped them in gauze from the first aid kit and told himself it was just dry skin from the cold and the work. Went to bed early that night. Lights off, windows cracked for air. Dreamed of running, endlessly running, through large trees that parted for him like water. On the third full moon, he woke up on the porch steps, naked, pine needles stuck to his back with sweat and something thicker, darker. His mouth tasted of copper and fur. He noticed a doe lay 30 yards into the trees, gutted, steaming in the cold night air. His eyes still reflected moonlight, wide and glassy. He stared at his hands and noticed that he seemed claws retracting slowly, fur receding like tide pulling back from the shore. Blood crusted under his nails. He managed to crawl back inside the house and lock the door and just sat against it shaking until the dawn broke. He boarded the windows the next day with plywood from the shed, bolted the door from the inside with heavy padlocks he bought from the hardware store in town, and built a cage in the root cellar. Logging chains bolted deep into the concrete, 3 heavy locks, and a hunting knife that he left on the dirt floor just in case he needed to end it quickly. Moonrise came slow and red that month, bleeding across the sky like an open wound. The change was faster this time. No warning, no slow build. His skin tore open like a wet canvas. Bones folded and lengthened with wet cracks that echoed in small space. He howled until his throat bled raw, voice breaking into something animal and wrong. The chains groaned under the strain. They held for roughly about 17 minutes. He ended up tearing free. Links snapped like brittle bone. The cellar door splintered outward in jagged pieces. The cabin door was already hanging open, and he didn't remember unlocking it, but then again he didn't remember climbing the stairs either. The forest, well, it swallowed him whole. Miles blurred in scent and sound. Blood, sap, fear, pine needles, wet earth, the copper tang of his own blood still on his tongue. The hunger wasn't just in his stomach either. It was in his teeth, his claws, and every muscle screaming to run, to chase, to tear, to fill the empty howling inside of him. He found the trail eventually, narrow footpath used by day hikers, worn smooth by boots. There were fresh boot prints led deep into the dark. One set, alone, scent sharp and human, but definitely terrified. Hunger rose like drowning black unstoppable mist pulling him forward. The headlamp beam cut through the night ahead. A woman in a green jacket, backpack heavy on her shoulders, moving fast but not fast enough. She turned at the sound of the claws scraping stone, eyes wide in the beam. She ran. He followed. Branches whipped past his muzzle, drawing thin lines of blood. Her breath came in panic bursts, fogging in the cold. She stumbled once, caught herself on a tree trunk, but managed to keep running. He closed the gap with every stride, heart pounding in rhythm with hers. In a small clearing ringed by pines, she stopped. She turned around, and she raised a flare gun. Red light boomed across the snow, painting everything in a crimson hue. She had fired it. Heat seared across his shoulder, pain igniting fury. He lost it and lunged. She fought, nails raked his muzzle, knee drove into his ribs. He pinned her to the frozen ground. Teeth met collarbone. Blood. Hot. Bright. Correct. It flooded his mouth, drowning the hunger for one perfect second. Then she laughed, low, wet, and somewhat changing. Her bones cracked in different rhythm. Fur pushed through the skin in waves. Eyes shifted from brown to amber, glowing back at him. She twisted beneath him, suddenly stronger, suddenly the same. They tore into each other, claws opening long furrows across backs and flanks, teeth sinking deep into the bone, rage folding into something blind and shared. Blood-soaked pine needles black. Howls overlapped until the forest rang with one voice. Two throats screaming in unison. Pain and need and the release of it all together. They fought until neither could stand. They lay together, panting, blood mingling on the frost, fur pressed to fur. The moon watched impassive, cold and full. Dawn came gray and thin. Danny woke human, alone on the clearing, wounds already knitting closed, green jacket scraps clinging to the thorns nearby, and one human tooth embedded in the dirt like a dropped coin. He limped back to the cabin. Chains lay broken on the cellar floor, door still open, blood trails on the porch boards, his and hers, already drying to a rust-colored hue. He did not repair them. He did not board the windows again. He left the knife on the floor where it fell. Now Danny waits for the moonrise. Not to chain himself, but to step outside barefoot and listen for the answering howl from the dark between the trees. Sometimes he hears it close, very close, carried on the wind with the scent of pine, blood, and fur. Sometimes he smells her on the breeze before the moon even rises. He no longer locks the door at night. He leaves it cracked, because the hunger was never separate. It was always there, waiting inside of him. And it always answers the call when it's called. Well, I really hoped that you guys enjoyed that one. It was definitely one of my favorites. And what kind of furry host would I be if I didn't throw in at least one lycanthropic story for you all? But I am feeling quite guilty for those out there still laying wide awake, wondering if they'll ever find the Z's that they've been looking for. So I decided to throw in a bonus sixth story for you all this evening. This one's titled The Demon in the Quiet Hours. Father Justin had been a parish priest for 32 years. Small church, small town, the kind of place where confessions were mostly about gossip and petty theft, and the worst sin anyone admitted was skipping Sunday Mass to watch a football game. He liked the quiet. He liked knowing every face in the pews. He liked the routine. It kept the older doubts at arm's length, if you will. The troubles, well, they started off small. One Tuesday night after locking the church doors, he sat in the confessional to pray the rosary. The booth smelled of old wood and incense. He was halfway through the second decade when he heard breathing, but not his own. Slow, measured, coming from the other side of the screen. He paused. Is someone there? But there was silence. But then, a small voice, low, calm, almost polite. Continue, Father. I was just listening. Justin felt the hairs on his arms rise. He knew every voice in his parish. This one belonged to none of them. It sounded older than the building itself, and patient as stone. He finished the rosary anyway. It was a habit. When he stood to leave, the breathing followed him down the aisle. Soft footsteps matching his, always one pace behind him. He could feel the weight of eyes on the back of his neck, but he didn't dare turn around. The next night he returned to the confessional, telling himself it was just his imagination or exhaustion, the long years of his life catching up with him. The breathing, well, it returned immediately, closer this time, on his side of the screen. Father, the voice said, you pray so beautifully. but you never ask for anything. Why is that? He gripped the rosary tighter until the beads bit into his palm. I ask for my parishioners, not for myself. A soft chuckle, warm, almost fond, but edging with something very hollow. That's very selfless of you, Father. Almost saintly, and definitely unnecessary. He left the booth faster than usual this night. The footsteps followed him to the door, stopped when he locked it behind him. But the breathing, well, it lingered, faint now, like it had slipped inside with him. On the third night, he brought holy water, sprinkled the confessional before sitting down. The drops hissed faintly on the wood, steam curling up like breath in winter. The breathing started anyway, unaffected and definitely amused. You think water frightens me, Justin? The voice asked. Water is just water. It remembers nothing. It forgets everything. Maybe you should try forgetting sometime, Father. He began reciting the prayer to St. Michael. The voice joined in with him. Perfect Latin, perfect cadence, spoken in the same gentle tone but with faint undertone of mockery, like a child reciting something he doesn't believe in. When he finished, the voice said, You know, I really like that one, Father. It's dramatic, but it never worked for me. Justin stopped sleeping in the rectory, moved to the spare room above the parish hall. The breathing followed, now in the walls, or under the floorboards, or in the rafters above his bed. It never raised its voice, never threatened. It just simply stayed, listened, and occasionally commented. You're tired, Father. You should rest. You forgot to eat today. Your stomach sounds empty, like your faith. Your hands shake when you lift the host. Are you afraid it will burn you? He tried fasting, tried vigils, tried sleeping in the church itself on the floor before the altar wrapped in his cassock-like armor. The breathing was loudest there, right beside his ear, intimate as a lover, and warm against his cheek. One night he whispered in the dark, What is it you want from me? The voice answered immediately, soft, patient, almost tender. I just want you to keep talking to me, Father. That's all. You talk to everyone else, God, the saints, your flock. You never talk to me. Not really. I don't know what you are. Yes, you do, Father. You've always known. You've just never said my name. Justin closed his eyes. I will not name you. Then I will stay nameless. And I will stay here with you every night, every prayer, every breath, until you do. He tried leaving the parish, requested a transfer, but the bishop denied it, said the parish needed him and that the people loved him. Justin packed up and left anyway. Drove 3 hours to a monastery upstate, slept in a guest cell for the first night, and he had silence, pure, blessed silence. Just when he thought everything was going to return to normal, the second night came, and back with it, the breathing. Same rhythm, same patience, from the corner of the cell where the shadows pooled deepest. He returned home. There was no running from a voice that lived inside the quiet spaces he had made for God. No running from something that he'd learned to wear silence like a skin. Now he celebrates Mass, still hears confessions, still prays the rosary every night in the confessional. The breathing is always there, on the other side of the screen, matching his cadence, finishing his sentences in perfect unison. Sometimes it adds a word he didn't intend to say, sometimes it whispers the sins he hears before the penitent even speaks them. He no longer asks it to leave. He knows it won't. It only wants to listen. And it definitely has all the time in the world. Lately, when he lifts the host during consecration, his hands tremble more than before. The bread feels heavier, warmer, almost alive. When he drinks from the chalice, the wine tastes faintly of copper. He tells himself it's age, fatigue, or even doubt. But every night after the parishioners leave and the doors are locked, the voice waits in the confessional. It never leaves, it never sleeps, it just simply breathes. And sometimes very softly, when he thinks he's alone, it whispers his name. It no longer calls him Father or Father Justin. Now it's just Justin. Like it's always known him. Like it's been waiting since before he took his vows. Like it will wait long after the church crumbles and the town forgets his name. Forever there, breathing and listening. Well, my furry friends and pack members, that's the night's full measure. 6 long, slow shadows meant to cradle you towards sleep and not chase it away. If your thoughts have grown heavy and you're breathing even, then let them carry you under. If the dark feels a little closer tonight, if the quiet in your room sounds like it's listening back, well, that's good. That means the stories did what they were meant to do. Listen, you beautiful twisted creatures, thank you for spending your time with me. If the calm found you, smash that like button so the algorithm knows we're doing something right. Subscribe if you want more gentle descents waiting for you next time the moon hangs low and the nights get hungry. And drop whatever quiet or not so quiet thoughts that are stirring in the comments. I read every single one in the small hours when the world's asleep and the shadows talk loudest. Sleep well, if it comes, or don't. Either way, the dark is patient. It will wait as long as you need. Sweet dreams, or whatever kind you prefer, and I'll howl at you next time.